Welcome to a new Planetary and Seismic update. On the SGI graph we see the planetary and lunar geometry from the previous time frame, from December 12th to the 21st. And we see the earthquakes that occurred, the mid to high 5 borderline 6 magnitude earthquakes. And we see the bursts of stronger earthquakes primarily with the lunar peaks. Most notably, early on the 12th, there was a 6.7. That was an aftershock of the Japan earthquake. I already mentioned that in the previous update. And we see then on the 15th, 16th, with the lunar peak, two stronger earthquakes, 5.6 and 5.7. And then around the 17th, like I said, that was actually the most powerful burst of stronger earthquakes, peaking magnitude 5.9 off the east coast of Kamchatka. And then also following the new moon and the lunar conjunction with Venus and Mars, there was a convergence there. And we see a 5.6 at the Bellany Islands and another two 5.6 earthquakes at the Malacca Sea and the Philippine Islands region. And these bursts of stronger earthquakes, that is the clustering of earthquakes within 24 hours approximately, in various locations in unrelated faults, that is hard to explain without an external modulator. And here we see again the moon is the primary modulator here, with the planetary geometry behind it as the secondary modulator. So let's have a look at the coming time frame. There's quite some geometry coming up, and that's noteworthy, especially the lunar peak 23rd, 24th. We see that here with the green labels, but there's also planetary geometry there, quite some right angle geometry with Mercury, Venus, Earth and outer planets. That happens on the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and also later on the 28th, 29th, thereabouts. Really noteworthy is the lunar geometry with Jupiter. That's a conjunction or opposition, if you will, on the 22nd. And following that lunar conjunction, there can be a stronger seismic activity around the 22nd, 23rd. Like I said, a high lunar peak, a convergence of semi-right angle geometry happens on the 23rd and 24th. Pretty tight with Saturn, Venus, Neptune and Mars in particular. And then we have the lunar conjunctions with Saturn and Neptune. That is on the 26th and 27th. But what I need to mention here is the planetary geometry, specifically with Earth, Venus and Neptune. That happens on the 24th. That is not the critical one, but they usually come in pairs. And the critical one here is Venus, Earth, Neptune on the 26th. Peaking with Saturn and Neptune at the same time. And in the solar system we see this right angle geometry. Like I said, they come in pairs because Earth and Venus are relatively close to the Sun, whereas Neptune is in the outer regions of the solar system. And we've seen large earthquakes in the past following this particular geometry, especially the right angle geometry of Venus. So that's Venus, Earth, Neptune on the 26th, around 2000 hours UTC. That's a critical one. And back to the SGI graph, there can be an obvious larger seismic response around the 28th, give or take 1 day, because of that geometry, especially the convergence of this right angle with Venus, converging with Saturn and Neptune almost at the same time. That is the potential, but the actual seismic response depends on the stress levels in Earth's crust. There needs to be a larger fault section with a critical amount of stress, the tipping point, and if that is the case, this geometry will trigger a larger earthquake. And we have also two right angles. That's noteworthy here. They are coming closer together. That's with Mars on the 29th, earlier on the 28th. And with Jupiter later on the 28th. There's some 21 hours in between. And Uranus is right in between. Let's have a look at the solar system again. This is the geometry on the 28th. Starting with Mars, right angle. And this is because, as you can see here, Earth is moving between the Sun and Jupiter, like I also explained in the previous update. Mars is moving in, and Venus and Mercury are also moving in. And as a result, we're going to have a 6-tuple alignment around 8-9 January. But it will also be critical with the next full moon on January 3rd. we see the first sign of this geometry forming with the right angles with Mars and Jupiter, and that can already be somewhat critical. There can be a stronger earthquake as a result, possibly mid to high 6 magnitude, because of the 45, that's the semi-right angle geometry with the Moon and Uranus around 600 hours UTC, also on the 28th. That's more or less in the middle. So that is quite a tight convergence here of lunar geometry with Mars, Uranus and Jupiter. And like I said, there can be a larger earthquake as a result, possibly mid to high 6 magnitude. And given the time, that could be around 30th or the 31st of December. But we may already see this burst of strong earthquakes, the higher 5, borderline 6 magnitude, with and following the lunar peaks overall. So this is the update for now. Stay safe. Until next time.